so that for people who aren't able to come, we can send this to them. Okay, and then let me share my screen. Sent. Okay. Can you guys see this? Nick, can you just tell me if you can see it?
I can see it, yeah.
Okay.
It's the whole browser, or
Okay.
I guess just the browser window. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, yeah, so we'll get started. Basically what we're gonna be going through is just kind of like what nutrition counseling is, and then I'll introduce myself as well and some of my background. So yeah, today we'll go over like who I am, my beliefs about like nutrition, what exactly nutrition counseling is, and then we'll go over the specifics of the programming that we're going to do for New Fitness. And then like we'll have like a dedicated Q&A at the end. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the presentation, like nitty gritties, but we'll move on. Okay, so who am I? So my name's Jessica, if you guys didn't know that yet. I currently am living in San Fernando Valley. So if you guys don't know where that is, that's in LA technically, but some people might not consider LA. It's still part of LA County, and I would say like it's still considered LA because it takes me like 20 minutes to get there. So I still think it's considered LA. And then I graduated from Berkeley, where I majored in nutritional science with an emphasis on physiology and metabolism. And that's actually where I met Nick, because that's where I started personal training in Berkeley when I was an undergrad. And then I ended up teaching the NASM course. And that's how Nick and I got connected, because I taught Nick in my NASM course, and then he ended up becoming a trainer, which was so cool. So I'm super glad. And I'm sure you guys are all also glad that he ended up becoming a trainer. So that's where I went for my undergrad. And then I studied nutrition. And then right now I'm going to USC and I'm getting my master's in nutrition. So I'm studying to become a registered dietitian. And I can, if you guys have questions about like what the difference between a dietitian is versus a nutritionist, I can answer that later as well. But that's basically what I'm focusing on right now. And I'll be done next spring. So May of 2023, I'll be done with my program. And then I can take my board exam to become an RD. And then basically how I decided I wanted to be an RD. So I guess it kind of goes back to when I first started lifting, actually. I got super into weightlifting when I was in college, just because I'm sure some of you are past college age, but I'm sure you guys know what it's like moving out for the very first time. You kind of don't know what you're doing. And I think at the time I really didn't know what to do in terms of food. And then like with the dining halls, I just kind of, it's literally all you can eat. So it's just like, I'll just like eat everything because I don't know what I'm doing. And then in terms of working out, I used to play volleyball in high school. So I think going into college when you don't really have like a regimen of working out because you're like not part of like a team anymore, you're kind of just like, you have to learn how to take care of yourself. I really didn't know what I was doing. So I felt pretty like not great about myself, I think my freshman year. And then I ended up learning how to lift, and then that actually ended up being something I like really enjoyed. But the only thing is that during that time, I think I kind of treated lifting as like more only for like aesthetics. I kind of only cared about like how I looked, and it did obviously make me feel like very empowered, like seeing myself get stronger. But like my main focus was like aesthetics. And then along with that, like with nutrition, I think in terms of nutrition, like I only cared about like how it was going to fuel my gains and like how it was going to make me look better. But then it kind of created this weird relationship with me and my food. And honestly, it kind of turned into like I wouldn't even let like my boyfriend or like my roommate bring like chips into like the dorm, because I'd just be like, how could you like even put that in your body? And then like also it's just like for myself, I was like, I don't want it there because I don't want to eat it because I feel like it's gonna like do something horrible for me. So yeah, at that time I didn't have a great relationship with food. But eventually, like I think I did end up at that time, I wasn't a nutritional science major. I was actually going to do public health, but I ended up switching because NutriSci just ended up being very interesting to me because I took a few classes. So then I switched over, and I think like kind of like the more and more I was like immersed into like the nutrition world, I like in my head knew that like, you know, food's not obviously all about looks. It's a lot more than that. It's like all about like fueling you, like it's like helping you with make connections with other people, things that you should like enjoy. So I knew that in my head, but it was definitely something I still needed to work on. Anyways, fast forward, I graduated from college. I ended up I'm even to this day, I'm still a trainer, but like that was kind of like my main focus at the time. And then also at the time I graduated was also right when COVID hit. So I kind of like didn't know what I was going to do because I was just like, do I go to grad school? I don't know if I want to be an RD or not. Like, should I just like do my personal training thing and just be fine with that? But I ended up that during that time when I was during COVID, my mom actually got diagnosed with cancer. And ironically, it ended up being a cancer that affected her nasopharyngeal area. So that's like the area between like where your nose and pharynx kind of are. So she ended up developing a tumor there. And then because of that, like all like the cancer treatments were targeted towards that area. And because of it, it's a very like in general, having cancer, obviously it's very hard to eat. But with that cancer specifically, that was one of the main things that the doctor told us, like this is going to be the number one thing that she's going to have problems with. And so because of that, we had to focus a lot on just like she just needed to eat. It was like basically all the things I had learned, like that I had fed myself of like food's all about like looking good and like, you know, you got to have like the most healthy foods to like fuel yourself and like you can't have anything bad. But there's just like scenarios where like, no, you just need to eat. Like everybody's a little different. There's different things going on. So like, I think that is what really pushed me to realize like, to like actually fully understand that like, there's a lot of other things that go on with food. And it's, yeah, it just made me like, in a way, like have a better relationship with it because at that time I didn't care about how I looked because I was just like, I just need to take care of my mom and I need to take care of myself. I was like physically and emotionally drained. I was like, I need to eat as well. And it's like not going to all be about just like aesthetics. So that's kind of how I also finalized deciding I was going to be an RD because I wanted to also be able to help people who may not even be trying to just work on aesthetics as well for them. And also just like people who are like also dealing with illnesses. So like there's not as many resources, I feel like, because once you kind of get out of the hospital and things like that, you're kind of just on your own. So that's basically the reason why I decided to continue my education. So anyways, going on from that, what my actual like more like what my nutrition beliefs are. So this is kind of just like a very brief summary. There's obviously like a lot of things that go like deeper into it as well. But one of my first things is, yeah, food's not all about being perfect. So food, I feel like shouldn't be just black and white. I know it's like a very big thing in media too. It's like, for example, it's like, oh shoot, you're eating a bag of chips. Like that's so bad for you. Like, how can you eat that? And then there's like, oh, you're eating like chicken and broccoli. Like good for you. That's so good for you. Like, and you're like not even using any seasoning. Like that's so healthy. But I'm just like, I think that's like one thing that has been really kind of like a very standard rule in like, you know, the fitness world, I feel like. But yeah, so I don't really personally believe in like good or bad foods and like labeling my foods. But I do think that there's going to be times when it's obviously this food choice may be a lot smarter for like what your goal is. And like you should be focusing on trying to fill more of your diet of like whole foods and things that are not as highly processed, obviously. But at the same time, it's also not healthy to be like getting so like everything is black and white. There has to be all these rules. It ends up like, you know, creating like a possibility of you having a bad relationship with food. And that could lead to things like, you know, maybe like not eating at all. And like that's something you don't want to do. So that's kind of how I feel about with like nutrition not being perfect. The next thing is nutrition needs to be sustainable. So with that comes, I'm not a big fan of bad diets. So things like people who like completely cut out fat from the diet, people who completely cut out carbs. I think it's fine if you do come across a diet plan that works for you And it ends up being that that's something you can actually see yourself doing for the rest of your life, which is something you really need to ask yourself. If you don't think you can do something like that for the rest of your life, you shouldn't do it. Because a lot of times with fad diets, people do lose a lot of weight, but then within like the next month, once they're off that diet, they just gain all the weight back, sometimes even more. And that's actually like a lot worse for your metabolism. It's a lot not good for your health at all for you to be yo-yoing like that. It messes up your metabolism, and then you end up gaining more weight. Your metabolism slows down, your body just doesn't know what to do. So I really discourage fad diets. You can take like ideas from certain types of diets and see if it works for you. But if you're just doing it because you're like, oh, this is trendy, I highly discourage doing that. Just because if you can't sustain it, it's not going to work for you long term. And I think most people, I would assume, want to keep their goals sustained. They don't want to just hit the goal and then it's gone forever after that. So also know that like when a lot of diets are like thrown into like media, obviously there's going to be like proof that it works. And usually it's because there's like a caloric deficit. So that's usually what leads to it working. But a lot of times when you have like research and they do side by sides of diets, it doesn't end up really being that like one is necessarily more beneficial than the other one, like long term. So you also have to look at that. So there's a lot of new diets that are going to keep coming out and you're going to see that, but you're going to have to learn how to shift through those and see like what's just like kind of like BS versus what's actually scientifically backed. And then last one. So yeah, nutrition's personal. I kind of touched on this a little earlier, but yeah, everyone has like different life circumstances. And so like I said, also kind of with the diets, if you find that one diet works for you, then that's great. Like, but that doesn't mean that you should like push it onto like somebody else that like what they're doing is wrong because what you're doing works for you. So I've had like conversations with people where I like, I'm just eating what I'm eating. And then they like kind of go off on me about like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like you're eating that. Like, do you know how many like calories or do you know how much sugar or whatever is in that? But it's like, you have to kind of look at the whole picture. You don't know why that person's eating that thing. You don't know, like, maybe they actually had been eating like really well. And then this is just like their one random treat that they're having. And like, also maybe they don't even think about food in that sense. And like, you're suddenly pushing like this idea in their head that, oh shoot, why am I eating like this? When really their habits were totally fine, but now you've pushed this totally negative idea into their mind. So just remember that like nutrition's personal and like everyone's life circumstances are different. So like, for example, like a mom, they have like crazy lives. I wouldn't like get so on their case about like, why are you not eating like just chicken and broccoli and like blah blah, like, and things like that. And when they're trying to like manage like mom life, they're trying to take care of their kids, they have like all these errands they got to run. I want for them, like their focus, I'm just like, make sure that you're getting the nutrition you need, make sure you're eating, try to eat whole foods, just try to focus on healthy habits that work for like what's going on in your life at that time. So that's my view on nutrition being personal. And yeah, some people like maybe they are trying to lose weight and then somebody else is not. So that's like another thing. Some people are like they have like the opposite problem that I think a lot of people think of is they're trying really hard to gain more weight, and then whereas someone else might be trying to lose weight. So obviously those people are not going to have the same type of eating habits that they're trying to go for. So just remember, that your type of goals will be different from someone else's and your approaches will therefore be different. All right, so moving on from there. So how does nutrition counseling fit into this? So nutrition counseling basically is just a support system that's going to guide you in making healthier food and lifestyle choices so that you can reach your goals and improve your health. So like I said, yeah, nutrition counseling, it's going to be very specific to you as a person. It's different than like it would be different than receiving like a nutrition class that's very like general, whereas counseling is very personal. So in counseling, like I would assess like your nutrition and lifestyle habits, which is going to be different from somebody else's. There's like general recommendations for everybody, I would say, but what's going on in your life specifically, like I would have to tailor it to like what your situation is. So that's where it differs. And then I'll help you create nutrition goals that are best for you. And then same thing, we'll provide you nutrition education. So it's like with nutrition counseling, I would want you to become more independent. So that's also why the last point says it's not a meal plan service. For one, this kind of also touches in with the RD versus nutritionist. RDs are licensed to give very specific meal plans according to the person. Nutritionists are not qualified to do that. It's not technically legal to give be like, okay, here's like your whole meal plan for the entire week. Nutritionists can give recommended like meal plans, but it's like a template sample. It's not catered to that specific person because they're not licensed to do that. It's like somebody being like, hey, you should take these meds, but like they're not a doctor that's licensed to be like, you need to take this medication. So that's where that little nuance, the difference is. But also in general, I wouldn't want to tell you every single thing you should eat because for one, I would want you to be independent in making your food choices because that's going to help you in more situations. And also like outside of nutrition counseling, you need to know how to choose your own foods. And also if there's like a specific meal plan, sometimes if people accidentally, if they're in a situation where they can't get that food, maybe they're meeting up with friends or they're just like physically just like not home or something and they can't get to what they were planned to have. You don't want to create that type of anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I slipped up on my meal plan because sometimes that can like completely make the situation flip where they're like, well, if I already messed up, I'm going to just give up. So I don't like having very specific meal plans. I can help you guys write meal plans because it's more like it's your idea. It's also based off what you have in the kitchen. And like I would help you in that sense because I do think meal plans are very useful if you're the one that writes it. But it's different when somebody else gives it to you and you're just like completely just like hands off, not even thinking about it at all. So that's how nutrition counseling usually is. We try not to just give full on hand holding the whole time. And then I'm trying to see if there's anything else I forgot in terms of that. Okay, so yeah, that would be like the background for just the nutrition counseling aspect. And then going into like the actual program. So these are like the steps of like how you would go into the nutrition counseling. So the first thing that we would need to do is we would need to start with the nutrition evaluation. So this would be like where I would actually look at like your nutrition history. And then, so I would send that to you like when you sign up, I would email that out to you, nutrition history questionnaire and the food log. So the food log, I would want you to complete before coming in for your first meeting because it would give me a better idea of like what you tend to eat, like the times you eat, what your schedule is kind of like, and what you tend to turn towards. And like, yeah, it gives me a better view of like your nutritional habits. But also with the food log, you just want to choose days that are like very typical of how you actually eat. So like if there's like a wedding or something coming up, like you wouldn't use that as your food log because that's not probably how you usually eat because it's a special event. So that would be like the pre portion to like the nutrition eval. And then when you actually show up to the eval, that's when we get more personal. And I would dive deeper into talking to you about those habits that you have, understanding what goes on behind that. And then give you some pointers kind of on like, this is probably around like what you would need for like your caloric intake, depending on what your goal is. And then like kind of, I can let you know kind of like how the macros are broken down, things like that. So that would be for nutrition evaluations. And then going on from there, you can choose from one of the phase 1 programs. So that's where it goes like you can choose either between the basic and the premium of the phase 1 programs. They're both 2-month programs because I find that if you end up not committing to something that's more long-term, it's hard to build habits off something that's only been there for like a couple weeks. Like you need time to build actual habits. And also another thing is like you need the changes to be like sustainable. Like I said, they need to be smaller changes. So if you're just trying to like do like crash diet in like a month, those habits are not going to stay. So that's why I require like a 2-month commitment for these programs. But yeah, so this is kind of where you need to kind of assess how much accountability you would need. because for basic, you'll get 3 remote sessions per month, whereas premium, you get 4. And then also with premium, I'll also reach out to you to prompt you for like check-ins and like send you things to check up on you. Whereas with basic, you kind of just reach out to me if you need help. And then otherwise you just come to the follow-ups. So that's where the difference is. So you would choose which one you think is more of what you need in terms of accountability. And then after you complete these programs, you can either keep going on with these types of programs, but if you feel like you still need them. And then if you feel like you're kind of getting to the point where you actually feel more independent, you kind of want to wean off, then you can move into a phase 2. You can't do phase 2 unless you've done phase 1 though. So this is only if you've completed one of these, at least for 2 months, one of these 2 programs. So phase 2, like I said, it's kind of like weaning you off from nutrition counseling so that you're like really independent. And so you would only meet up with me twice a month at most. And then same thing, you can reach out to me whenever you need to. I'll be available. That's how the maintenance phase would work for phase 2. And then that's actually it. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions though about either like any of the stuff that I talked about? Nobody's cameras are on because I was presenting. So I didn't see any confused faces because I couldn't see faces. Switch this out. Any questions about either like, oh, wait, hold on, chat. What do they want intermittent fasting? So intermittent fasting, it's mostly like, it is just all timing, basically. I do think, like I said, this is kind of where it gets into personal things because for some people it works really well. For other people, it does not. And I would say, hold on, I'm gonna stop sharing because I can't focus. Okay. I would say with the intermittent fasting, basically, I personally don't really like when the window is very, very small. I like it to be like a little bit bigger in terms of like how much you like of how much you can eat. So like just more so because I think a lot of times for one, it can lead to kind of like binge eating habits. That's the only reason why, like, when the window is very narrow of when you're allowed to eat, you kind of get into like this habit of like, this is my only time I can eat. And sometimes because of that, when you're like super hungry, sometimes you don't make like the smartest choices necessarily sometimes. For other people though, like it does work really well. So for them, I'm just like, if you are actually making like whole food choices, like things that are like healthy and easy for you to sustain and you're not kind of going crazy with the hours, then I'd say like you can just stick with it. I just don't really like when it's like super strict on like people are like, oh, less than 8-hour window to eat. Because if you think about it, like you need time to digest. You're kind of forcing yourself. Some people don't have like the stomach volume to be able to fit their entire day's worth of food within like that tiny window. So that's kind of like my opinion on it. I do need to do like more research on it because I know there's some benefits. Like all the diets are going to have like some benefits and then there's always going to be cons. But for me, it's like, yeah, you can kind of take from like that idea of intermittent fasting and switch around because like if you think about it, like intermittent fasting just having like a strict window. It's like just having like those rules up. So like for some people, they're like, naturally they just actually don't eat breakfast, so technically they are following an intermittent fasting like schedule because they don't eat their first meal till 12, but that's just because that's just what they've been used to their whole lives. And then like that's totally fine for them. They eat between like 12 to 8 and I'm like, okay, that's normal. I don't think it's restrictive. But for somebody that maybe grew up eating like starting at 6 a.m and they eat their last meal at like 6 p.m and they have like a 12-hour, and then for them to shrink it down to 8 and then they're starting to go crazy, I'm like, just don't do it. Like you don't, there's not like so many more benefits to intermittent fasting that you would need to do that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Alex, I see your hand.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for the presentation in general. And I was wondering if, and this may not be a question that you can answer at this point, because it may be just specific to, each person, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, maybe even like about just like general suggestions you have, both in terms of like like finding that balance, like, or specific suggestions around like finding that balance of, gains and also health and having a healthy relationship, and maybe like what worked for you, or just general kind of suggestions that you have that we could kind of start on as, in the meantime, as we're thinking about sessions as well.
Yeah. So I think I'll talk first about like kind of like the food relationship thing first. I think the easiest thing you can do is all going to come down to mindset, in the sense of like thinking more positive reinforcement rather than negative. So rather than being like, I can't eat this, this, and this, it's better to think like, hey, I need to fill my diet up with this, because you're just focused on like, oh, I need this. So then you're like just thinking about that, rather than when you're like, oh shoot, I can't have this, and then you like really want it because you just keep thinking about it. That helps a lot, because like I think one thing is like, if you think about athletes, for example, they're so into like, they're not necessarily thinking like, oh my gosh, I really want like this one thing, but I like can't have it, because they're like, in the sense of like, because they're trying to just like fuel themselves for them, they're just so busy with like trying to get like their workouts in, trying to train, that they're like, shoot, I really need these nutrients because I feel like depleted, So it's like, in that sense, they're not really thinking about like, oh, I can't have that, because like maybe they are because they're training, but like in the sense of like, they're like, oh shoot, like for example, like track athletes, I feel like they like carb load, because they're like, I need the carbs because I have a meet tomorrow. So they're not focusing like, oh shoot, I can't have carbs, but they're like, I need the carbs. So it's like that type of mindset, I think, helps thinking of like, and for example, like protein, for example, if you lift, which I think all of you do because you're with Nick, but you're like, oh shoot, I gotta hit my protein requirements today, but how can I hit my protein requirements and like stay within my limits? That forces you to make better food choices so that you can hit that goal of your protein. So that helped me a lot, because, okay, so, and then this is gonna actually turn into like actual tips. So one of the things I would always teach my clients, like if they're kind of like, the first things I always focus on, because they're like, okay, how do I figure out my macros? I'm like, okay, first thing you should worry about is actually like your protein. Like if you're lifting, you gotta worry about your protein intake. Don't worry about the fat and carbs, because that's gonna fall into place if you have the right amount of protein that you need, and you're trying to focus on eating whole foods to hit that goal. Because more than likely, let's say you have like a caloric goal that you're trying to hit to like either maintain weight or lose or gain. Then you find your protein that fits within that caloric goal. And then you would basically say like, oh, well, I can only eat like these types of foods to hit this protein amount and stay within this goal, which usually ends up being whole foods. So things like veggies and like lean meats and things like that, because they're like, oh, well, if I had like I'm gonna make this up. If I had like a huge McDonald's, I don't even know what McDonald's serves. If I had like 5 McDonald's burgers, so I could hit my protein, but the thing is that you surpassed your calories right there or something, because you're like, I should have made a better choice so that I could hit my protein but stay within my calories. So that's how I usually think of it, in terms of like making better choices, so that I'm not really worried about like, I'm not really thinking about like, I can't have that donut today, but I'm like, I need to hit this goal, like my protein. So I have to eat that because I need it, because it's going to help fuel me. So I think that helped me with like making, not feeling so restricted, if that makes sense.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, I do have one other question, but just
Yeah,
about
sure.
specifically, I was wondering if you have suggestions around like, the general like, and that may be more something that has happened more in like a personal session, but do you have general suggestions around like protein goals for folks that are lifting?
So that's like one thing that has been like, oh man, there's been so many conflicting things in research. And honestly, that's something I'm still trying to figure out to this day. Even being in school for nutrition, I've heard so many different things. Like, I do think, okay, so at this point right now, I do think that like 1 gram of protein per lean pound of body mass is fine. The emphasis on lean, because people will be like, oh, I need like 1 gram per pound of body weight, but I'm like, your whole body's not muscle. So like somebody could be obese and they're like 300 pounds, like, you don't need 300 grams of protein, like calm down. Like, so I'm just like, okay, you got to think about what your lean body mass is. And for most people, they don't know that unless you get like a DEXA scan or a bod pod. So I would say in that case, usually like 0.8 grams per pound is usually good enough at that point, just because you're kind of accounting for the fact that you probably, I mean, everybody has fat on them. So it's like, yeah, you got to account for that. And then don't mistake that, because the RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram. So that's, don't mistake that. That's different. 0.8 grams per pound is what I would say in terms of if you're trying to build muscle. So that's where it's a little different. That's assuming you don't get like a DEXA scan or like a bod pod to help you figure out what your lean body mass is. So you could do that. Yeah, don't do like people get too confused with the 1 pound or 1 gram per pound because they don't account for like the other things. So yeah, you could try that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Nick, I think you had a question because I saw you pop up, but you're also muted.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to comment because I remember you saying that protein tip in our class.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
I really heard that because it helped me a lot with my own personal nutrition. Just so you know, lifelong kind of battle with like, what should I be eating? And like hearing fad diets, media pushing like fat is bad, carbs are bad, only eat fat. Like there's all this pressure coming from these other sources, and I didn't know, what to do. And then you kind of simplified it with that sentence, and it stuck with me. And just wanted to thank you for that because it helped me with my own nutrition. And then the focusing on like the positives, like what should I be fueling myself with nutrition wise, instead of like as opposed to like negatively reinforcing a diet, like what can I not have? I think that really helped too. And this took like 20 years for me to figure out. And it sounds like the nutrition counseling you're going to be offering is going to be helping people kind of accelerate that process to find out what works for them, because I'm sure what works for me doesn't work for everybody else.
Yeah.
And the relationships with food is huge. I think like finding ways to feel good about what you're eating is like one of the most important things, because it should feel good, right?
Yeah. I think that was like a big thing for me in college. I would literally like bring my own food to like people's events because I wouldn't want to eat their food. And the thing is, I wasn't even prepping for like competition or anything. Like I wasn't even in sports. Like mine is like my own lifting for fun, but like I wasn't in like a sport. I wasn't trying to do like a bikini comp or anything like that. But even still, I was just like, no, I'm not gonna eat your food because like it's bad for me. So I would literally like bring my own like sweet potatoes and like chicken to people's house. And then the thing is, like, sadly, like I think obviously like in today's like culture and stuff, there people really applaud that. They're like, you're so disciplined because you bring your own stuff. And I'm like, but now looking back on that, I'm like, oh no, that's not good. That's not good that like that's something that's encouraged. Obviously, like you do want like majority of like your nutrition to be like coming from like whole food sources, like trying to eat more grain, like whole grains, like vegetables, fruits, lean protein sources. Like you do want to focus on that, but that doesn't need to be your diet like 100% of the time. Like you need to have also room for like connecting with other people, like cultural experiences. Because I promise you, like if you were on like a certain diet and you went to travel somewhere else, you would probably not be able to eat a lot of those foods because it doesn't fit the diet of whatever you're on. So I think it's just like you kind of got to think about like big picture, and also remember like you having one day off does not affect your whole week unless it's like a consistent, like, because sometimes there is the other side where people will be like, well, I only eat bad one day of the week, but I'm like, but for how many weeks have you been doing that? And like, is this like something that's been going on like for years at a time? And also, because that's also why I don't like cheat days. Because then it leads to people binging, because they're like, this is the only day of the week I can eat whatever I want. And they actually undo all the work that they did throughout the week. So there's two ends of the spectrum. There's like, yeah, that's why for me, I'm like, better if things are just in moderation. You have like healthy habits that you're like able to sustain, so that when you do kind of have like those days off or whatever, it's not going to really change anything. So that's my view on that.
I also liked how you just said trying to eat things, like trying not this, trying to eat that. Like the end of building those habits and being independent, like going through your phase 2, will be you won't have to try anymore. They'll be habits, and you won't have to think about it. It'll just be your natural kind of healthy, balanced lifestyle where it works for you, it enhances your goals, and doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, I definitely don't want it to feel like something you're constantly thinking about. It's not fun having to think about, because the thing is with food, you can't avoid it. It's just something that we need, so you have to eat every day. So that's like another thing, is like you don't want it to be a chore, because if it's something you do all the time, it's gonna mess with your mental, and like it's not great. Are there any other questions though about like even like the program itself? I hope it was clear enough. Like maybe that's why people don't have questions. So the process of how it works. Oh, that's a good question, Christine. So Christine asked what a typical check-in would look like. Oh wait, sorry. There's sorry, really quick. The comment before you asked says, I feel as long as we have early dinner, that kind of becomes intermittent fasting. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so it's just like, it's kind of just like a label. Anyway, so yeah, what would a typical check-in look like? So basically, yeah, so at the check-in, I would always we'll always have like at each time you check in, like a goal that you're working on for like those, depending on if you're meeting 3 or 4 times a month, like it could be like a week between each session. So like I'll have something that you're working on for that week, that we're trying to like either like enhance or like something we could change, kind of going over like maybe what did you struggle with this week, and then like what were some wins for this week, and then what can we keep like implementing, and then we'll kind of work on those small things. I don't like working on a lot of things at once, because you can't focus on so many different things. I try to limit it to 3 goals at most a week, and I try to kind of make them related, because if your mind's split in all these different directions, you're not going to remember. So maximum 3 goals, might not even have 3 goals for that week, depending what they are. And then so that's what the check-ins would look like. They're only 45-minute check-ins. You don't have to use a whole 45 minutes if you don't need it, but it just gives you time to like talk to me if there was something you wanted to go deeper into. And it gives me time to also like educate you on like new things. So it's like, it would always start with like, yeah, we're going to go over what your past week was like, which usually does kind of take a little bit, just because people like to dive deep into it, and I kind of want to know more details. And then it would just be followed up by like more nutrition education, like answering more questions and things like that, and then making new goals for the next week. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, okay. So bulk and cutting. So I would say I've never done a bulk and cut, like a designated bulk and cut. I've accidentally done a bulk and cut, but like that just usually just happens just because like, yeah, I try not to be super strict with like, I'm trying to do this and that. I don't usually encourage bulking and cutting as like the first step for people, just because the problem with it is that if you bulk, some people never get to the cut, if that makes sense. So like they just because like you're eating so much, they just get used to it, and then they're like, shoot, because like people hate cutting season sometimes because they're like, I gotta cut so much calories, and I've been so used to eating that they just can't ever go through with it completely, and then they never finish it. So that's why I don't really turn to that as like a first option. I do more recomping, I'd say. So that just means like you maintain the calories that you're consuming, but we'll change like the volume, like the how much you're lifting and things like that. So that would kind of go hand in hand with like Nick, and then I would have to kind of like communicate with him like what's going on. So yeah, I like to do more like recomping, where like you kind of like more maintain the weight you're at, but you're just getting more muscle and losing more fat. So because I mean, yeah, muscle is more dense than fat. So your weight on the scale may never change, but you see yourself getting like way more like tone, more lean. So, and even for me, in my case, actually, like I am a lot more lean looking, but I weigh more than when I started first ever working out. Like I'm probably like 10 pounds heavier than when I first ever started, but I look more lean and toned than before. So that's kind of why I go more for like recomping. But for some people, they do actually really well with bulking and cutting. So like if they have like the mental stamina and like they're totally fine with it and doesn't really mess with them, I'd be like, yeah, do a bulk and cut if you really like it, because some people like love the way they look during a bulk because they get like huge and they like how big their muscles look. So like for them, like mentally, if it's good for them, I'm like, yeah, go for it. But the thing is with bulk and cutting, I don't like dirty bulking. I don't like when people use bulking as an excuse to be like, I'm gonna eat all the McDonald's I want because I'm bulking. And I'm just like, that's disgusting. So I'm just like, I don't like that. But in terms of like just like increasing calories versus like cutting a lot, I'm fine with it if like it works for them. But I usually try not to do extremes. I'm sure you can kind of tell from my presentation. So that's why I go more for recomp, so that it's either like if there is going to be a cut, it's going to be pretty small, and then we'll just change your training volume a little bit and like kind of your food choices. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question well. Any other questions? I'm free until, well, I'm free past 9 too, but I kind of assumed people would want to be off by 9. And we still got like 10 minutes left, but also if nobody has questions, then that's fine too. I don't think there's any more questions. Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not specifically. I just, you actually touched on it, which is that we will be working synergistically together, like nutrition plus training, so that they jive with each other and both are working towards the goals. Like you said, you can increase training volume and you can tweak nutrition, all at the same time building like healthy habits around nutrition and healthy habits around training, because the training has those kind of extremes too. And you can yo-yo with training, you can go too hard, overtrain. And our goal, both yours and mine, I think, is to find that balance where we can keep getting closer to our goals, past them, like, and continue it as in a sustainable way, while enjoying the process too, which means enjoying your food, enjoying your life, taking time to rest, giving yourself permission to rest and like recover and do all the things. So I just want to just emphasize that point, that we will be working together. Like you'll have the team like on your back, like nutrition, counseling, and the training, and it'll work together.
Yes, for sure. I definitely will want to hear what people have to say, like how they've been feeling during sessions and things like that. Because it could be that like we need to change something in the nutrition if like they're feeling drained during the session or vice versa. So, or yeah, I don't know. So that'll be good. I definitely want things to be synergistic, and then I think also, yeah, kind of you touched about goals. Like everybody's goals are going to be changing. Some people don't have the same goals all the time, which also I think you should have changing goals. So yeah, that'll go with like the training as well.
Figured I'd just go off mute for this, just
Okay.
because it'd be faster to ask. I'm actually no longer training with Nick, so I'm curious, like, if the nutrition and the training are sort of like must be a package together, or is it possible to, like, if I were interested in the nutritional aspect, to just kind of focus on nutrition without the training?
Totally. Yeah. I'll definitely like be accepting people who are not training. So yeah, if I don't know if you had anything else you want to ask in regards to that. We're totally open to like adding you without the training as well. They don't have to go together.
Okay, sorry, Nick.
No worries. I want like all clients that have discontinued training to be part of the community still. And like, I'm really glad you're here actually, Christine. So thanks for joining.
Okay, maybe I'll talk and ask some more questions with you, Jessica, like offline, like on Discord.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to add. I don't think so. I think I got everything I needed to say in terms of like the actual. Oh, I think.
I have a question.
Oh yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Just in regards to collagen as a protein source for building muscle, because I tend to like it more than any other protein powder or whatever, because I feel good about it, because I don't like plant-based proteins as much. So what do you think about, there's been a lot of conflicting studies on it as well, from what I've read. Some sources say that it's a good protein to build muscle, but some sources do say that there are not all amino acids present in them to actually help build muscle. So what do you think? What is your take on this? So
I do think so. The thing, collagen, that the supplement, it's still a pretty new thing. So it is kind of hard to say. Because I can't, what I'm going to say right now is just kind of based off like what I do know as of right now, just because I haven't researched super deeply into it, but I've heard like the same things that you said. I would say at this point, if it is like the way that's easiest for you to consume protein, I would just keep going, just more in the sense that, because it doesn't hurt, like, like it's better than you not consuming any protein if like that's a way for you to get it in. Also, like obviously in general, like I mean, supplements are supplements, so like they shouldn't be your main source. Like you should be trying to find it from your normal diet, which I'm sure you know. So it's like that's why I was like, it doesn't hurt if you're supplementing it anyways, because that's not your main source, until like more and more research comes out. Also because like even I don't take protein powders anymore either, more so just because I had them so much that I'm literally so sick of them. I just like can't handle it anymore. So like I stopped taking protein powders, so that just makes me like used to having to get it from other sources anyways. So that just like shows that like you don't need it. But if you like it, like I would just keep doing it. Like, and then as more research comes out, I could probably update you more on it. But yeah, the thing you did say though about the amino acids, that is important when you check your collagen. I don't know if it would tell you that on the thing, like if they add or not. Yeah, because if you don't have complete protein sources. But the thing is that if you're adding it, I'm assuming into a shake with other things.
Yeah, definitely, because that's not my main source of protein. It's just like 2 or 3 times a week as a shake or a smoothie.
Oh yeah, so. Then you're fine. Yeah, because like I don't know anybody that takes collagen with just water. like if it, I was just like, if you took it, if you took it the way like people take like protein powder, like with just water, which I think is also gross, but like if you just did it like just like that, then I would kind of be like, oh okay, like just make sure you're mixing it with other things just to make sure. But if you're mixing it already in shakes and stuff, then you should be fine, because you're probably pairing things enough that you're gonna get the complete protein, so then you're fine. Yeah, and if it's like you said, you're only doing it a couple times a week, it doesn't really make a difference. So yeah.
Thank you.
All right, any last burning questions? I think that might be it, Nick.
Okay. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for that presentation. And it was just great to hear like your actual like personal story and how you got interested into the nutrition and the lifting. And I just like, I have my own personal story about how I got into all of this too. And it's just nice to connect like and see you as a person and on video and meet, like for everyone to meet you. So I just appreciate you making the time to do this. And I'm really excited to move forward with the new fitness and the nutrition aspect of it. So thank you.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, thanks for adding me to the team. I'm like super excited for all of this. Yeah.
And you should definitely fly down for one of the Sunday fun days.
Fly up, you mean?
Fly up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure I will make time to come up for at least something.
No, you don't have to.
Now that no. I've been trying to plan a trip to the Bay for a while now. So now that like COVID restrictions are like lifting and stuff, I think it's like more feasible now.
Okay. Well, if you do, give a heads up so we can put thing all around it.
Yeah, either that or like if you guys have an event, I'll try to make it to an event or something.
Cool.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna end the recording.